Hi, welcome to this lecture. And this lecture is about your course project. And course project is very important because it will account for 35% of your final grade. Oh, all right, and this is a high time when you should start thinking about it. Okay, so here we go. Let me give you some important information about project. So this will have different stages in it. We'll start with the design stage, but before we even do the design, the most important thing is to come up with a team. So here you're given a chance. If you want to form a project team, you can create your team. Now the maximum team size has been set up to be 3. So if you know if you know 2 other students in the class and you being the third one, then you can form a project team and make sure that you have good understanding. So the best is if you know if your friends are also taking this course, then it will be very easy to form a team. Otherwise, you can reach out to other students. I have shared the information on sign up sheet. You will find the information about other students in the class as well, so please reach out. You can email them asking if they are interested in forming a team with you. So if you're comfortable forming a team, then I'll say, yeah, go ahead, make a team and pick a project topic. And there is a deadline. I'll mention the deadline in the next few slides. So by that deadline, you should have formed your team and you should have picked your project topic as well. If for some reason you want to work alone, you are more comfortable working as single person, that is fine too. So please go ahead, whether you are single or you are in a team, please provide that information on the sign up sheet. This is important now. We have a deadline for that. The deadline would be given in the next few slides. Now you must be wondering like what the project would look like. So the purpose of the project in this course is to um, demonstrate your understanding of databases that you have learned. So for that thing, you need to pick some decent project, and using that project, you should reflect your understanding of the different tasks which are involved in designing a database application. All right. So what could be the topics, right? So there are a number of topics which you can find, and you can work on those, but the best is pick a topic that you are interested in. So that's the positive thing about this course. The project is not forced on you. The project topic is not forced on you. You can pick the topic that you like the most. So what could that topic be? Here are some examples. So you may design a database that keeps track of the music. Your database could be about music data, where you can find information about different music, the composer, the singer, so on, studio and all that. So it all depends. Since I'm not very good with music, so I don't know what information I should be storing about music. But if I do some research, I'll get to know, like if I have to create a database that will be storing some music data, then I'll figure out, like what would be the important data that I should store. But the best is you pick a topic which is of your interest, and that should be something that you know pretty well. So if you are a sports person, you like basketball, right? So find some data related to the basketball. Or if you are a soccer fan, you like soccer, you can pick the soccer data, right? Do some research, think of making a database that relates to that. So there are so many options for you. So please do a search, and you'll come up with some very interesting projects. But you need to pick the topic right now, otherwise it will be too late. Okay, so it could be about music, it could be about any club. Okay, so it could be even about the business, it could be about movies, it could be about finance database, it could be about food recipes. Look around, it could be about something like Airbnb, right? It could be like Uber. So this is something you have to think about. Think about some topic and please confirm that. Please provide that. Form a team, pick a project topic, and please provide that information on the sign up sheet which I already posted. And that link will reappear in the lecture as well. Now, one interesting thing about the project topic is that duplicate projects are not allowed. So there's another reason why you should act fast. If there's something in your mind, if you have some project idea, then please go ahead and mention that topic on the sign up sheet, because the first come would be first served. Okay, so if you have some idea, please go ahead, check whether anyone else has taken that topic or not. If some team has already taken that topic, then you won't be allowed to work on that. Otherwise, if you don't see anybody who's working on that project topic, then go ahead and mention it, right? So that other team is not picking the same thing that you want to work on. Okay, so the first team to request a project will be assigned the topic. Alright, so yeah. Now the point is, okay, it's a database project. We need some data. Now, how much data should we collect? So this is a very common question that the students ask me. So I'll say that let's put some limit on the data size, because if I don't put a limit, then it won't be an interesting database project at all. So uh, as you must have understood by now that in a relational database we store all the data in tables. So let's think about different tables, like how big the table should be. So the range that I'm putting right here is minimum of 10 to 100, right? So I'm putting minimum as 10 for the reason that in some tables in the database it is very difficult to think of data, more than 10 rows, right? But in some cases it is possible to have a lot of data, and sometimes you can get this data online also. Alright, say as an example, if you want to create a project that is based on movie data, right? So from IMDb you can get a lot of data, so you're not constrained by the size, right? If you have a table named movie, there are a number of movies that you can get online, so this minimum 10 is not a problem. But in some cases it is very difficult to come up with even 10 records, right? So for that reason I have kept the minimum as 10, maximum as 100. If you want, you can get more than 100 as well. You won't be penalized for more data. More data is always a good news. Alright, so yeah, when you think about your database, please think about this also, that you have a limit, like how many records you should have per table. Alright, so now the point is, okay, fine, I have some project idea in my mind. I know that I can get that much of data. So how should I enter the data, right? So well, as we have been doing, when you create a table, and assuming that you'll be doing your project on MS Access, you can pull the data from the file, right? So that is something encouraged. If you have, please do that. You should also have some means of allowing the user to enter the data through keyboard. So that is possible to do with the help of the GUI thing that we will learn about. These are called forms. So MS Access allows us to create forms. So in the project you should also create some forms. We will discuss how to create forms in the next few lectures. And you are supposed to use forms also, so that in those tables you are also allowing the user to input some data. Okay, so some data should be key entered as well. So you should have that flexibility in your project to allow the user to enter the records. You will, anyway, you will have some record through the files, right? You can, when you're creating the table, you can pull the data from the file, as I have shown you the demos and probably you have done as well. Okay, so that's what we have in the next slide. Like, importing the majority of the data is preferred. So if you are creating a movie database, then I'll say, okay, fine, at least if you have some 20-30 movies or even more, just put that information in an Excel file, and you know how to pull the Excel file is in MS Access for a table. You will create a table, and for that table you'll get the data from that Excel file. So that's something you should be doing. Otherwise, entering the information for 30 movies might take little some time. Okay, if you have patience, perfectly fine. Otherwise, you can pull it up from the file. Now this is how you can impress me by your database. So that means if you could somehow um, store a variety of data types in your database, then that will show that you know the database pretty well. As an example, think of different attributes in your table. If you could incorporate date, that will give an impression that you know how to handle date data type or date attribute. If you can think of some URLs, if you can think of some images. In the past, students have done that. They have created some databases with image information as well. So it will have, if you have different kinds of data in your database, right? So data should demonstrate a range of data types. That's what I'm saying. That will make your project more attractive. So anyway, I believe you'll have numerical data, you'll have string data, you'll have names, you can have address, so you can have numerical and string data type. You should also think of date data type. If you have, if you have, oh yeah, for movies, say you want to store the release date of a movie, so that is a date data type. Okay, so think of all these different kinds of data that you can store in your database. Okay, now the topic should be of a size that its relational data model diagram has. So yeah, so this is another point which you should keep in mind. I did receive some email, I believe, regarding the project size and all, and I asked the student to hold on because anyway, I was working on this lecture. So if you're concerned about the size of the project, and you should be, because that's how I will evaluate your project. So the project should be of decent size. Now the question is, how do you evaluate the size of a project? Is it on the amount of data? Well, not exactly. Data is important. You should have significant amount of data. But the way I will judge the size of your project or a complexity of your project is on the basis of number of entities that you can identify in your project. All right. So the limit is that at least you should have 5 entities. So this is where you should be very careful about the project that you pick, right? So let me take some example here, and we'll see, like, in what cases it will be easier to come up with the entities and in what cases it will be difficult. So if your project is about university, right, we understand university system pretty well, so let's take the university only. So for university, let's see how many entities we can find. And I believe university database would be an interesting one, but it depends, like, who will pick it up. Not more than one team can work on university data. So you have entities like student. Let me see how many entities we can find. Student, courses, course, right, and then you have professor. So we found 3 entities very easily. Then you can have department. So 1 2 3 4 4 we could easily find. Then you can have what, classrooms. So easily I can list 5 entities. So this would be an interesting database to work on. If you spend more thought, you might get even more, right? So let's think about the sixth one. The sixth one could be programs. Programs means undergraduate program, graduate program. So that's another entity that you can think of. All right. So in this case, like university, it is easy to find entities, right? Similarly, if you are thinking of a banking system, or you can think of some entities like for banking, you'll have a customer, you'll have location. So The point is, whenever you pick a topic, make sure that it is easier to identify at least 5 to 10 entities. Right, in the past I have this experience that the students, they came up with very interesting project, which was kind of inspired by the data that they already had. But the problem was that from the data that they had, it was very difficult to come up with the entities. It was basically, the data was pretty rich, but it was just about one entity. So please avoid those situations. All right. Okay, so that's about entities. We know entities are important. We also have another concept which is about relationships, right? So if you look at these entities, then all these entities are related in one way or the other. Student is related with the course, right? Professor is related with the course. Professor teaches a course, and the student is related with course as well as professor. Okay, and yeah, there's another entity that we can think of, which could be transcript, right? Yeah, transcript is a table where we'll be storing all the grades that different students are obtaining. Similarly, you know how these entities are related. Professor is related with the department. Professor is working in a department. Then the classroom should be associated with the professor. Professor teaches in a classroom, and then students, they can go to the classroom to attend the class, and in the classroom some courses are taught. So the relationship is also important. So not only entities, you need to think about relationships also, and you should have similar number of relationships, which means the number of relationships should also be in the order of 5 to 10. And don't hesitate. I'm holding my office hours. You can ask me questions in my office hours, or you can even send me an email. We can go over your project idea, right? And I can tell you, like, if you come to me like, professor, this is the project I want to work on, but you know what, I could only find three entities, can you help me finding more? I'll be happy to help you. But the only thing is that you need to act fast. Pick a topic, start thinking about it. All right, yeah, good. So this is about the sign up document that I mentioned to you. Please sign up on this document as soon as possible, and if you could form a team, provide the information about your team, and then uh, pick a topic, and there is a deadline for the statement as well. Once you pick a topic, you need to write a simple English statement like what you want to attain in this project. Okay, yeah, so this statement and the other deliverables would be submitted on the blackboard, and I will keep you posted on the deadlines. But the most important thing right now is to sign up on this document and yeah, give us the information. Like, first, are you working in a team or not? If you're working alone, then what is your project? If you're working in a team, then also what is your project? And if you're working in a team, then the team should have all the team members right there. All right. So there will be some presentations. There are two presentations in the project. The first presentation would be the presentation of your diagram, which is the design. So there are points for each stages. So when you present your RDM, you'll earn some points, and those points will add to your final project. And you have to do the presentation of the final project as well. So here, this thing that we have here, this information, like when do we present, this is about your final project presentation. This is about your final project presentation, and your final project presentation will happen during the last week of the semester. I will provide you the sign up sheet for presentation as well, so please sign up, okay, and present it. I will be using a Zoom link for that, and I will share the meeting ID, and then it is up to you. If you're comfortable presenting in front of the class, then I will ask the other students also to join if they want to. Otherwise, if for some reason you want to present it alone, that's fine too. I'll respect your stand. Okay, but I'll encourage to present it in front of the class. Okay, you'll get a lot of confidence by doing that. Okay, so for time slot, we will think about that later. You can request the time by through email as well. And anyway, I plan to provide a sign up sheet. So when the sign up sheet is there, please sign up to the sign up and make sure that there's a time slot that works best for you. This is about our final project presentation. We want I want the final presentation so that I want to see how your system is working, because it is possible that if you just submit your project, I may not be able to do the justice with your project. I may not be able to run properly. I might miss something that you feel is very important in your project. So the best way is to have a presentation. The duration of the presentation and all we will discuss later. Maximum, I think you'll get 15 minutes to present. Each team will get 15 minutes to present. Okay, well, if you need more time, I can give you more time, but tentatively 15 minutes each team. So now let's think about the deadline, right? So the first deadline that you have is 18th of this month, and by that date, excuse me, you should form a group. And if you have to work in a group, please form the group and provide that information on the sign up sheet. And also you should have some idea about the topic, right? So here for this deadline, which is 18th of this month, that's the Thursday, you need to form a group and decide the topic. So these are the two things you have to do. Today is 16, you still have 2 days, but I think it should not take much time. Write some email to your friends. If you're forming a team, and pick a topic, decide a topic, and you need to provide that information on the sign up sheet. And we have another deadline after 18th. The next deadline is 20th of this month. And for this, you need to think about your project, right? So you should think of what all you're planning to do in your project. So that means you need to write a statement, and that statement should tell me like what do you want to do. So as an example, if you say that I want to create a database about movies, so you should say that what that database will do. So you should say something like that. It all depends on your project. You may say that I am creating a database which will store the information about movies. I will be storing the information about the movies, different actors, producers, directors, the rating. Right, so all this is your statement. So make sure that whatever you are saying in the statement should be feasible to do. It's not that you cannot change your statement later, but it will help if you stick to some statement which is more objective. So that's what we want by 20th of this month, a statement of your database project. You should ask me like how will you write, what to use. I'll say don't think too much about it. You can write it on Microsoft Word format, convert that to PDF and upload it. Or if you want to write that on a notepad, that is fine too. Make sure that it is readable. Okay, I don't need too much of information in that, just half a page, or maybe some 6 7 lines should be fine. Make sure that it is complete. Half a page is sufficient. So don't think of writing too much, because I won't be counting the number of pages that you're writing on statement. Just simple, very very simple, right? What do you want to do in your project? Okay, what data you're planning to keep, and what is the purpose of making this project. That also, if you can have, that will be great. Alright, so that was about the coming two deadlines. Let's think about the other deadlines as well. So after 20th, you have this requirement. You need to create a relational data model, RDM. That means your design part, right? So your design of the database is due on 22nd. Alright, so next Monday, so I believe it's some 6 days you are getting which is a reasonable time. And all these things are possible only when you have done the first two things, right? When you know what the topic is, and when you know whether you're working in a team or not, and when you have some kind of statement, because this statement would be helpful in creating the RDM, right? So what you will be doing, whatever statement you have, you will make that more objective, more structured, well designed, right? And for that you'll need an RDM. So now the question is, what should I use for creating an RDM? So let me put my priorities, what I like, what I would prefer. I'll give the first preference to Workbench. So you can use MySQL Workbench. I recently uploaded a video lecture on how to use Workbench to create an RDM, and I also shared one link on the Blackboard which gives the instructions how you can install MySQL Workbench on your machine. Okay, so I prefer Workbench because the RDM that you get after using Workbench is a lot cleaner, beautiful, well organized. But if for some reason you like MS Access, that is fine too. But I'll give MS Access the second priority. But there's another point. Uh, if you have used MS Access to create the RDM and your RDM looks good to me, then you will not be penalized, right? So you won't be penalized for picking any tool for RDM. As long as your RDM is correct and complete, you'll get full points. But Workbench is a better tool, I'll say. And the most important thing that you should keep in mind is this deadline, right? You should upload the RDM by 22nd, which is the next Monday. So a lot of work for you to do. Okay, so by 22 you will finish your RDM, and as I said that you are required to give a demonstration of the RDM also, because I want to interact with you. I want to understand what was going on in your mind when you were designing your RDM. So there will be a stage which will be a presentation stage. So from 23rd onwards, I will encourage you to come up with the I'll encourage you to come and present this thing. Present your RDMs, which should not take much time, maximum 10 minutes, right? 5 to 10 minutes. Just tell me, like, why did you design it in this way? And the reason why I want you to present is just to understand what was going on in your mind when you were thinking about the design. That's one thing. And the other part is that I want to give you the feedback, right? So that rather than objecting on your implementation, I will give you some feedback in the design stage itself, so that if possible you could fix your design and then you will do the implementation. And don't worry, if I find anything missing in your RDM, I'll give you a chance to update your RDM, and you will not be penalized for missing few things in your RDM, right? So try your best to come up with the best RDM, but if you miss something out, don't worry, you'll get the chance to fix that. Okay, and when you are presenting the RDM, ideally I would like the other students also to join your presentation, but it is all up to you. If for some reason you're not comfortable presenting to a class, and then you can present it just to just me, or otherwise in the normal situation I would like you to present that to the whole class, and in that case I will share the meeting ID with the other students also, and your presentation would be done through Zoom. I'll create the meeting ID and I'll invite you to join that. Okay, and what to expect there, you need to just briefly explain your project, like what you want to do. So you might like to read your project statement and just walk you through your RDM. That should be fine. Now the class, what would be the role of the class? Well, the class can participate. How will the class participate? By asking question to the student who's presenting the RDM, like why did you do it this way? Because that will help the students in the class as well. This interaction, right? So interaction will be possible when the students they join this presentation. They can ask the questions, they can provide the constructive feedback, it happened to me. I mean, sometimes the students, they gave very very good feedbacks to the students who were presenting their RDM. Okay, so yeah, so the class is expected to ask questions and give some feedback, and they will also learn, right? You might like some aspect of the design which you might do in your project as well, and it help you in preparation also. Like say there's a group that is presenting RDM today and you are supposed to present it tomorrow, then you might learn like how did the presentation go for the first batch, and what you can learn from them, and what you don't want to repeat in the second presentation. All right, so fine, if you are done with the RDM, then you will have to think about its implementation. Design is done, now you need to implement that. So then from RDM you'll have to create tables, right? So you are done with the RDM, I'll say okay fine, go ahead and implement. Then there is a stage when you have to create the tables in MS Access, if that is what you're using, corresponding to the entities and the relationships that you identify in your RDM. For that also we have a deadline, and that deadline is on 20th of this month, right? So you'll be pretty busy, so be prepared for that. Okay, so keep these deadlines in mind and act fast. So by 28th of this month you should have created your table for all the entities, and if you need to create individual table for relationships, then also you should do that by 28th, and you will have to submit those tables along with your revised RDM. Because if I ask you to improve something in your RDM, then you will have time till 28th to improve your RDM and also implement that using different tables. Good. And after that, I'll see, I might probably start the presentation of the final project by 28. I'll put some sign up sheet. By the last day of the semester, which is 3rd of July, I want you to submit your whole project uh, on the blackboard. All right, so now what should be there in the whole project, let's go over that. So the final project that you have, which you will be using for your demonstration, should have few things, right? And you'll be evaluated on those things, like whether you have it or not. So let's think about what are the other components that you have to do, what are the other things that you have to do for your project. You will have to create some forms, right? You'll have to create some forms. So what is a form, you might be wondering? It is a GUI which you can create in MS Access. So when we talk about forms, then that is specific to MS Access if you're using Access for your project. Then there are these cool things called forms, which you can use for interacting with the table. Using the form, you can enter some information in the table. All right, so for interactive for better interaction with the table, we have these tools called forms, and the forms can be created in MS Access pretty easily. I will have few lectures which will go over the creation of the forms. So you should create some forms in your project which you'll be using to enter the data into your tables, right? Okay, so like the way we had this query wizard in MS Access, you have the wizard in for creating the forms as well. You'll use that to create forms. There are different kinds of forms that you can create. All right, so you can pick the one that you feel is best for your table. All right, so you can pick whichever form you believe is best for your table and use that. So you need to create some forms. Use your forms to populate your table. This I might ask you to do. I'll say okay, have you written a form? All right, let's use this form to put more records in your data. So make sure that you have written such a form which can be used in the demo. Okay, yeah, and your project should have the capability of getting the data either from the file or through form, and you should enter data so that the reasonable queries can be asked and tested, right? So we should have a reasonable size of data. All right, because ultimately the point is, why are we creating a database? We are creating a database so that we can store some important information about the database that we are creating in different tables, and we can query that table. So if the user is asking some question and we have a data to answer that question in our database, then how should we query, right? So ultimately you will have to write SQL query as well. Therefore, make sure that your data is sufficient to answer the queries that you might ask. So you should enter enough data so that the reasonable queries can be asked and tested. Different tables will require different number of rows to be reasonable, right? So this is something I already answered. That let's think about this issue from university point of view. Different tables will require different number of rows to be reasonable. This is a very important point. I was trying to explain that in the first few slides of this lecture. So let's look at the university system, right? So in the university you will have different um, tables. So what do you think? Number of students would be really big. We may have thousands of students, right? So yeah, we'll have thousands of records in the student table. How about departments? So the size of the department table would be considerably smaller than the size of the student. Okay, so we will be mindful of this fact that in some table it will be difficult to come up with too many records. Okay, so use your judgment for that. Okay, good. Now, in this project that you're creating, you should also have some 5 interesting questions that your database can answer. And these are the questions I'm asking you to come up with. So as you are coming up with your project topic, you should also think of, like, when I'm gathering this data, then what queries my data can answer, right? So as an example, if you're making your movies database, I'll say, can you give me the list of the top 5 movies over the past 10 years, something like that, right? So you need to think, can the database which I'm creating answer a simple query like this? Or list the movies with the highest earning over the last 5 years, 10 years, so on and so forth, right? So these are some interesting questions that you have to come up with, and the questions should look interesting questions, right? The question should not be very simple, like name all the actors in your database. So that is simply a select star from um, actors, or select star from actor, if actor is a table in your movie database. So you need to come up with 5 interesting questions. These are your these questions are to be framed by you only. Okay, so these questions should be question for a user of your database that the user might be interested in asking. And then these queries that you're coming with, these 5, you should have English statement for that, and you should also write the SQL statement for that. Okay, sorry about this, I did not intend to cut that off. All right, the SQL statement. Okay, English description and then the corresponding SQL statement, because English statement is not going to run in your database. Ultimately you will have to write your SQL queries, right? So whatever SQL query you wrote to this question by the user, so for 5 interesting questions, they should be first written in English, and then you should be writing corresponding SQL queries which you would need to implement in your database to get the correct answer. And how should we say that this SQL query is interesting? It will be interesting if you are using joins. So I asked this question, like when I usually take the demo, I'll ask, like, which was the most complex query that you believe you have written, and the user will say, okay, this query. Then I'll say, how many joins you had to do. So join is another way of making an assessment like how complex your query was. So if your query involved 3 or 4 tables, then that means you will have to have 3 joins, right? For 2 tables, we will need 1 join. For 3 tables, we will need 2 joins, right? So that way, the number of joins in a query is also a measure using which I can judge whether your query was complex or not. I don't want you to make a really complex query, but decent query, right, which involves a few joins, like 2 or 3 at least. For each question, explain briefly why, when the user would want to ask it to the database, right? This is also very intuitive. uh, the queries that you have should be practical queries, right? Don't invent query. And don't try to get the answer to a question which people may not be interested in asking. Alright, so these should be practical queries which a user who's about to use your system will ask. Alright, so for the forms, as I mentioned in the previous slide, that you have these GUIs right here, right? GUIs are there which are used to create the form. So for forms also, there are different categories, and we want you to create at least 2 hierarchical forms. So now you'd wonder, like, what are hierarchical forms? Don't worry, I will cover that in my lecture. In the hierarchical form, actually we have some 2 forms. One is a parent form, then the other is a child form. I believe, and as far as I remember, hierarchical forms, they come into picture when you deal with the relationships between 2 tables. So maybe one to many kind of a relationship, in which you will have one parent form, and then you will have a child form. So you have parent and child kind of relationship between tables. When that's the same, then you may choose to create hierarchical form. So we want you to implement 2 hierarchical form for your database. Creating forms are pretty easy, so don't worry about that. I will cover that in my lectures. But before that, before you reach to designing the forms and all, there are a lot of things that you can already do, because I finished all those things in my lecture. Now, with the forms, you have a lot of options available which you can use to make the form look a lot pretty. So it's about your time. If you have time, please spend time and make sure that these forms are looking attractive. Those are pleasing to the eye. Okay, so all these things are possible to do, and you can do that, right? So, and this is how you can impress me during your presentation. If your forms are beautiful, look attractive, then yeah, that's a good news. And there's one more thing, which is report. So forms are used in order to interact with the table, so that the user can enter the data in a very convenient way. And there is something which is called report. Report also looks similar to the forms, but report has a different purpose. So reports are generated when we want to get some data out of our database, and we want to pass it out to some other person or other organization. So reports are not for interaction. Reports are generated to get some data out and share that data in a presentable format. I will tell you about reports as well. There, I'll have a class in which I'll show you how to create a report. And as I said about forms, reports are also very easy to create. And the report should be of interest and should be of use to the user. Alright, and the reports are often based on the queries. So you can write report for different queries. Write a query, and then whatever the result is of that query, you can create a report out of that query. Now, this is about formatting. Be sure to use appropriate formatting, constraints, and validation rules for your database. Right, so constraints are something that you can enforce using primary key, foreign key, domains, and there are validation rules that also are somehow linked to the constraints. You need to submit the MS Access database with the forms and the reports, as well as the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint is something which you will be using for your final project presentation. Okay, that thing also you should submit in your project presentation. All these documents should be zipped in a folder, and that folder should be uploaded on the Blackboard. And you should sign up for presentation. I will make sure that I am providing you the sign up sheet well ahead of well ahead of the deadline, so that you will have sufficient time to sign up and find a slot for presentation. So you should also add these queries in your presentation, like what interesting queries you have considered in your database, and what are the queries that you can test. Okay, so you should have those queries also included in your presentation. These are to be implemented, and these things should also be listed in your presentation, so that it makes it easier to present. So let me add one more point which is missing here. If you are working in a team, then team member contribution should also be there. Team member contribution. So you should say that member 1 did the GUI part, member 2 collected the data, member 3 wrote the queries and all that. So this is something I would prefer to have, so that every team member is participating. Often I had the complaint from the project team that uh, so and so did not work. We were 3 in the team, but only 2 of us worked, the third person did not work. So this point, that team members contribution is important. That way I believe every student in the team would be forced to contribute. Alright, so how will I grade? I will share the grading criteria. So the grades are the grading is done on the basis of the different components. So I'll check, do you have forms or not? Good, you have forms. Do you have 2 hierarchical forms or not? Yes, you do have. So you get full points for the forms component. Then I also check, like, how did you present? How does your data look like? How is your queries? I mean, are your queries good or not? So every component that I have specified in the previous slide would be considered in grading. So make sure that when you're implementing your project, you are taking care of all the guidelines that we have for project. Teammates should participate. Okay, so this point is coming again. All teammates should participate in the presentation. Okay, so another interesting slide which will help you in preparing your presentation. So when you're presenting, make sure that you have all these things in your presentation. You should have ER diagram, then ER or RDM diagram, let me call that RDM diagram. You should have, then you should have information about your tables. It's good to have some snapshot of the tables that you created with some records in there. So while grading, I think, like, are your tables reasonably populated? Do you have that limit which was 10 to 100? Do you have the number of records in each table in the range from 10 to 100 or not? Do you have 5 interesting queries or not? Do you have sufficient forms or not? Do you have 2 hierarchical form? Do you have a report or not? Does your database contains appropriate constraints or not, right? And do you have any additional feature which was not mentioned and you went ahead and implement? Alright, so all these are the things that I'll have in mind when I'll be grading your project. So that's what I have for this video lecture on project. Let me know if you have more questions, and please sign up on the project document that I'm sharing with you. Thank you so much.